So again, to all of my Republican friends, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, why are you returning us to another reset, which you all condemned at the time? It is simply history repeating itself over and over again. In terms of the Trump administration, they were out of power, and regardless of whether he was going to be sent to prison, whether he was going to not run for president because he was embarrassed, he had a team of people working for 4 years.
Hello everybody, my today's guest is Mr. Andrij Dobriansky, spokesman of the UCCA, Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. We are speaking about the events last week in the Oval Office and the rapidly increasing danger for peace in the world. My name is Christoph Müller, I'm a German musician and I make videos for Ukraine here on YouTube. If you appreciate this, the best way to support my channel is to like, share and subscribe and leave your opinion in the comment section. Доброго дня, пане Андрію.
Hey, Vitayu, thank you for having me on. Wie geht es Ihnen?
Oh,
It's a very calm world right now, isn't it? Right?
absolutely. But yeah, so let's have some fun. It's great to see you. So many things are going on. And last week you told me you have been with the Ukrainian delegation all the time.
Yes, it was a private, not a government delegation, but we had a visit to Ukraine at the beginning of or in the middle, somewhere around February. I don't know what date it is today, but I was hoping to be back in Ukraine by the first. That was moved, so I hope to be back in Ukraine by the end of this month, which is March.
Okay, so this was not the presidential delegation. So
Not yet, right?
yeah, so I thought you would have maybe inside this room and have seen the whole catastrophe going on, the so-called White House massacre. I think we have to talk about that. My initial thoughts are those that really now there's the separation between Europe and the USA. I say for the moment, it's not, hopefully not forever.
We're definitely hearing those after effects as far as what the German elections and what the potential the new government in Germany is saying. It very much echoes what other European leaders are saying. And as we are speaking today, we just heard a phenomenal speech by Emmanuel Macron in advance of the European Council meeting tomorrow. Yeah, very much all echoing what you just said about being worried about a rift between Europe and the United States. But frankly, there's only one alliance, and it is not based on being a member of the United States. It's based on having the plurality of nations staying in that alliance, and it seems like it's the United States that seems to want to step away from it, both as far as military obligations and the military alliance, but also as we saw at the United Nations on the anniversary of the full-fledged invasion, voting against European allies and voting with our enemy.
This is horrific, and the Trump administration and Donald Trump especially behaves really like an ally of Vladimir Putin, which is a catastrophe, and this could have been foreseen already. I remember when we had our first talk, Andrij, it was just after Donald Trump got elected. I told you about my feeling that maybe I made it myself nicely, and I said, yeah, maybe Donald Trump has the potential to change things, either the good or the bad, but we hope for the good. And then you gave a very interesting answer, and you said, yeah, he has the potential to either make it good or ruin it completely. I also was smiling about that, because that sounded funny those days, kind of not funny, frightening funny. But now on Wednesday we saw...
There were certainly a lot of people who were saying this exact thing would happen before the election. In particular, a number of foreign policy panels, right as it was time for people in America to make their decisions at the end of September, in all of October, people justifyingly saying that Donald Trump will continue his push that he began in his first administration of pulling away and even potentially leaving the NATO alliance. But also, people specifically said that he will likely, or his administration will likely blame Ukraine for the problems that Europe is in right now. And we are anticipating even more disinformation to be spread online via short videos, via think pieces, newspaper articles.
Yeah.
all explaining how corrupt Ukraine is, how Zelensky needs to be replaced. All of these topics will be simply escalated in the coming weeks and months. And this is
Yeah.
why I'm particularly heartened by the words of Emmanuel Macron, the words of the new administration in Germany, and I hope to have similar kind of reaction to the European Council meeting, because if it's true that they're interested in overriding the votes of certain nations and all vote as one, I think that'll be a very good sign for the world.
You're right, and that is wake up call number 515 for the European Union. And I have some feeling that they understood it now. This morning they
Yeah.
gave in the news in Germany that the government, the still government, made now the decision to raise debts for about 500
Yes.
billion euros, and which is amazing. 3 weeks ago, this wouldn't have been absolutely impossible.
Historic, absolutely historic, yes.
Absolutely historic, because they feel now if they don't do it, there will be really the catastrophe.
It's really one of my discussions I'm having, and I've had this. We just did a conference in Washington, D.C. with a bunch of think tanks. I'm happy to share the links for all those sessions that we broadcast. But also having these discussions, I was just on a roundtable discussing this very topic on TRT World. And the short-sightedness, the lack of acknowledgement of history when we're talking about, we can look at the entire last 2 millennia of war on the European continent and where we are today, and how specific United States policy in line with our allies was about not arming Europe, about not having Europe produce this many munitions, not having a standing army, and specifically envisioning not what we're looking at right now for a reason. For a reason. This is good or bad. This was specific United States policy, and that's part of the reason that the United States, and this is of course, what the current administration and their lackeys don't understand, is that this was done specifically, and whatever tariffs, what have you, whatever ways we could keep the European economy, the Canadian economy humming, so they could do their part while the United States bore the rest of the burden militarily. That was not an accident. That was not, as they say, being taken advantage of. That is what we preferred to see, and for the first time in 2,000 years, we did not have as much bloodshed on the European continent as we had preceding that. So
that was so wise what you tell. I have a very interesting book here. It's the
Cannon,
memoirs of Cannon. You know this book, of course, I guess.
yes.
And I think everybody should read it also. There is this so-called long telegram inside, and those people who don't who have forgotten about, and maybe it would also, I'm not sure if Trump would be able to understand what's written there. Can I ask you what is your idea why Donald Trump does behave like that? This is absolutely insane, and nobody normal should behave like this, but he behaves like that. What's your idea? Why does he behave like that?
It's the same question you can ask about Putin. It's same thing you can ask about anybody who doesn't suffer any repercussions. That is the main thrust of Donald Trump's entire career. You could say that he suffered repercussions because he's the only person we know of who lost $1 billion and then went on to run a business after he lost $1 billion. He wrote off $1 billion. So you could say, well, that's an after effect that he probably didn't want. Sure, but in the end, it didn't matter anything. So there is no effects upon him that dissuade him from doing what he's doing. And this is where the comparison to Putin comes in, because we have been talking for years, especially since the Ukrainian war began in 2014 when we first met, but also the Georgian invasion, the uproar that began with the complete leveling of Grozny within Russia or on Chechnyan territory. There are no after effects. There are no naslidki, we say in Ukrainian, kare, no punishments for what he does. And the few world leaders that do understand this, I would point to our Ukraine's neighbors in the south, and how Erdogan's army very quickly shot down a Russian airplane that was crossing over it. No matter what, if this is a nuclear power or not, those are the only kind of that's the only kind of language that Putin understands.
Yes, true. And but Today I saw also this speech of Justin Trudeau, the Canadian
Yes.
Prime Minister, and this
Hmm.
was a really straightforward speech, and he was addressing Trump directly and speaking in a clear voice, and I would love to hear things like that also from our leaders.
So today, the United States launched a trade war against Canada, their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense.
Couched it by not just addressing President Trump directly, but he also addressed the American people and let them know that the tariffs that are being imposed are not because of their actions, it's because of the choices being made by Donald Trump.
Canadians are reasonable, and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight. Not when our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake. Now I want to speak directly to one specific American, Donald. In the over 8 years you and I have worked together, we've done big things. Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
Right, and then he also addressed his own people. The Canadians said this will be tough, and that's what we miss here in Germany, and I don't know, in France maybe not so much, and in England also not. They had Churchill, but here in Germany we are really. I cannot tell you. We are really lazy, and now sort of we are waking up. But also, why did the American people elect for Trump? That was the big question, because they knew also what would happen. But
it was a populist election. Sure, people may know what was going to happen or not, but in a populist election, and this happens anywhere where a populist leader is done, for the most part, the overwhelming number of media voices and outlets were solely focused on underscoring how bad things were, at the point where the United States was actually far outpacing the Western world in terms of its GDP, the recovery from COVID, the incredible investment in jobs that was through the CHIPS Act that is being proposed to be repealed. We created more jobs in the last administration than any administration prior to that. So it was so you have this good news, yes, but that wasn't what the media was focused on. The media was focused on highlighting all the negative aspects of life in America, and that is what the supporters of Trump were able to elevate, whether it's through their podcasts and their voices, and that doesn't matter. And I'm not saying Republican voices, I'm not even saying conservative voices, but across the political spectrum, people kept complaining about how bad it was. And I, in some way, relate this to what I witnessed in the 2019 election in Ukraine, when, albeit, of course, we had a lot more oligarch rule over our television stations in Ukraine, but there was only one television station owned by Petro Poroshenko, and all the others were run by people against him, so they were also running all negative ads. So in any kind of populist wave, if there's a great number of negative attention where people aren't focusing on the positive, as President Trump tried to do during his speech, all he was trying to do was the positive, not explaining why prices are so high, not explaining that he can't control what he said he promised he could control. This is when there's a change election, and we've had this when President Obama was a change election as well. President Bush was a change election from the Clinton administration. People often tend to focus on the negative.
Yeah, Andrij, but this time it's something else. Something bad is going to happen.
I agree. Something bad is going to happen. We are in full agreement there. I just feel that we stumbled into it with the sense of it can't be that bad.
So I would like to ask you, how can we overcome this? Because we in Germany, we have also this AfD party, the very horrible rightist party.
Favorite of our Elon Musk here, yes.
Absolutely. I wonder, how does Elon Musk know that there is some party called AfD? Yeah.
He
Who
knows a
told him
lot about
that?
what's happening. He knows a lot about what's happening. He knows a lot about how to elevate those parties, and it's not just AfD that he's interested in. And he knows about, a lot about apparently how to do salutes that are banned in certain countries. I don't, the scary thing is their attitude towards South Africa right now, and how they have convinced the United States government that it is the white minority that needs to be welcomed into the United States if they choose to apply as refugees, and very hostile against the South African government proper, which is a radical change for the United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is something that the United States had been working on for many decades. I'm not saying that the South African government is without blame here. It has been ruled by a party that is frankly hostile to many nations, very doggedly communist and Marxist in its ideology, very very untoward and scary things being said, including towards Ukraine. So I'm somewhat familiar with their rhetoric in terms of what the internal policies are there. But again, to come from that kind of background for Elon Musk, to be elevated to such a place within the United States, and then not only to be supporting a party like AfD or other parties around Europe in a similar vein, but also elevating the kind of language that is shared between that party, what's happening with the Afrikaners in South Africa, on his platform X, and not banning that in any way.
For me, this has something to do with disinformation, where the Russians are really good in, and the social media. It makes me completely shocked that all those super rich, high-tech Silicon Valley guys, Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, whomever, they are sitting around Trump, and the Google people, and they own everything, and they own the whole knowledge, and they can control the whole. And my hope was up to now always that those people, they are smart and they have some ethical rules in there. But now I see they join with Trump, and so my hope is gone here. I'm still using Twitter and Facebook. I don't use, but we have to use all that stuff.
Right.
How can we overcome this? Not by convincing people.
This grand strategy of illuminating the world isn't a quick fix. One thing that is being done that I appreciate. We started with the conversation about the European Union, Macron, what's happening in Great Britain, even promises being made there. The fact that instead of having everybody bow down, as Trump wanted Zelensky to do, he basically wanted him to kneel in front of him, and that I'm proud of President Zelensky for doing that. Because he represents a people that have been enslaved for centuries, and there's a point where you can ask, you can clarify, but there's no need to bow and grovel, no matter how great a price it is. And then, but so the rest of Europe understands that it's if the leading nation in the world is going to choose a different course, it is better to stay together, and they're not falling apart and all going their own way. They understand that it is just one element of their alliance that's sick right now, and they need to make sure that the rest of the body politic is made whole, it stays together, survives and thrives through the next several decades. And for that, they need to do what they've pledged to do, which is build a strong military base within Europe, a sustainable, sovereign one that is not reliant as much on the United States. This will diminish the United States because now the United States can't dictate to them what needs to happen.
Exactly.
And we know for the future that at least the European powers will be able to speak not just diplomatically, but with honor towards each other's losses and sacrifices for each other, unlike what we're hearing from the United States, which only seems to matter to Vice President Vance or President Trump, only matters what they are personally involved in. No pledges of or treaties made to other presidential administrations. It is only a personal deal that they're interested in, and they will demean the sacrifices of nations like Germany, nations like France, even nations like Estonia, which deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq, including Ukraine, which sent 1,600 people to Iraq, even more trainers to Afghanistan, which were there up until 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So long deployments, all for the benefit of the United States, because that was the one time that Article 5 was enacted for NATO. And all these nations have been deployed in the Mediterranean for this purpose. They've been deployed in those two nations I mentioned, Iraq, Afghanistan, and others as well, all sacrificing lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is not a single thank you that President Trump would give to those nations right now.
I guess he even doesn't know about that. I'm not sure.
No.
Yeah, and that's why that was insane what he was doing there. And when you mentioned this military alliance of Europe, which is now to be formed, and it has quickly to be established, and I would really say that Ukraine should not only be included in this alliance, it should also have even a leading role, because it is the only country which is able to fight and which knows how to fight and which has proved how to fight against Russia. So brave.
Well, we know that Ukrainian forces were used in the evacuation of Afghanistan. We know that
wow.
that,
Okay,
that's even during a time when they are otherwise engaged, they were able to help out in Afghanistan.
That's good that you say that.
When the United States pulled out, Ukraine was there. They are the most combat ready, combat experienced army in all of Europe, in all of the world
Absolutely.
right now.
Yep.
Yes, they need to be a strong part of this. And I would also say that the neighbors to the south that I mentioned, Turkey is the largest army technically in all of Europe. They have the most men on paper, and they would definitely they have already volunteered to be part of a peacekeeping unit. I think it would be very interesting to see if they were given the responsibility of defending those areas like Kherson, where a lot of the Turkic Crimean Tatars were repopulated, and the eventual retaking of Crimea. I'm sure that they would like to have a conversation about what's happening there.
Yeah. That sounds good. We in Europe, we have always this feeling that there's America, it's so big and so mighty and so powerful, and even if there's Trump
and fat and rich. Remember, fat and rich.
I know other ones who have this too, this attribute.
Yes.
But yeah, we are full of awe of America, but now with Trump, this awe diminishes very quickly, and we wake up all of a sudden. We got a kick in the
there's a vulgarity to it that turns people off. The not diplomatic language, being unkind is very much something that breaks the illusion that you're talking about. But it's also the lack of morals in one respect. So not just showingly being unkind with your language, but also not respecting treaties like we just talked about.
Yeah, breaking treaties all the time. So Germany, when the new government will be established, we have a different situation, which is not good, because you might know that the left party and the ultra-right party, AfD, they would have a more than a third minority, and so they can block each decision, and that's why they had to. And so this is not so easy, and that's why we have to also. I'm not sure how we can establish this military alliance, but it has to be done really quickly. Otherwise, it will be.
Well, we want it to happen quickly for two reasons. One, we want as much help to Ukraine as possible before, while the United States pulls away. Sure. We also want it to happen quickly because if we delay, then the political will won't be there later. Let's say Russia takes over more, it might give rise to the fringe parties to say, well, it's too late, we shouldn't do that. However, there's something to say about the general populace in the middle, independent voters or people who just are wary of quick changes. So there is something to be said about being scared about changes, especially to military doctrine, happening too quickly. Of course, we're in this position because we took everything too slowly, right? We just heard that from Macron. We've heard that many times before, especially with the frustration of the previous government, not necessarily to Minister Bayerbach, but to the actions of Chancellor Scholz and others, just the frustration in general with the United States and the Biden administration, as well as the Europeans, of just not making sure that they can produce the arms that are needed right now.
What can we do?
Stay together, and President Zelensky is doing this very well. He is visiting other countries very well, and he's also, at the same time as he's doing his visits, they are actively looking to expand their diplomatic corps. They want to be in other nations that they haven't talked to on a regular basis. Unfortunately for Ukraine, they don't have the luxury of having as many ambassadors that the other countries have. They need to be involved in Africa. They need to be involved in ASEAN countries. And the more those countries understand that Ukraine will be there, especially as a food trading partner, especially with all the military technologies that Ukraine is developing that are tested already on the battlefield. The last showcase of just the latest showcase of military technologies at the IDEX conference showed some phenomenal battle-tested drones that Ukraine would be ready to mass produce for international buyers. These are all things that a small island nation state would much rather have than an aircraft carrier. All those remarkable self-propelled drone ships. You do not need to have a destroyer on the coast of your island. You can have what they call a mosquito fleet, a swarm of tiny, tiny drones pushing away pirate ships and what have you. So these are the kind of things that Ukraine can offer the world in terms of individual partnerships. And so the question is, what do we do next? It's keep being engaged on the side of Ukraine as well as on Ukraine's partner side.
Great. What do you think about this rare earth deal, what Trump has tried to negotiate and make Zelensky sign the treaty?
It is my belief that it originated for the most part out of Ukraine. Both the United States and Ukraine know about these rare earth minerals because of the survey done in the 2000s by the U.S. Geological Survey. Back then, the major news out of that survey was where are Ukraine's shale gas deposits? And that was quickly scuttled because after the war began in 2014, some of that territory was taken over. So no American company was willing to come in to do fracking or shale gas innovation in Ukraine. But part of that survey was, where is the lithium? Where are the irons? Where are the rare earth minerals? And for that, Ukraine was very much ready to give President Trump a home run. He talks about Greenland. He talks about the Panama Canal. He renamed in his mind both a mountain as well as the Gulf of Mexico. He wants to be remembered in history books. He doesn't care about the deal with Russia. He wants a picture of him shaking his hand with the president of Russia, and then that will be remembered in history books in his mind. So Ukraine came to him with this phenomenal deal, which would secure the United States dominance in technology for the next half century at least. And it is really American firms that would have the know-how, just like with the shale gas or offshore development in the Black Sea. It is the United States that really leads in the development of a lot of these mining technologies that would be able to get at it quicker. And let's not forget that a lot of this mining is either strip mining or very caustic to human population centers. And what the Russian invasion has done has literally cleared the population over many of these deposits, meaning that this would not be something that we would have to move people from cities already. We would go into depopulated areas, also speeding up the process of getting it out of the ground. So all of this was good. Ukraine was ready to do that, but with specifically looking at this incredible, again, half century, maybe a whole century of deposits that would allow the United States to be in the lead, not dependent on China, Taiwan, or other places. And in return, they were looking for some hard guarantees, not the Budapest Memorandum, a hard guarantee.
Yes.
And what came back to them first was a very insulting offer that, basically they wanted Ukraine to sign something right away, and then there were no promises for anything, not even monies. It would all be in the future. Ukraine sent its negotiators to Washington. They actually worked out a very tough deal. Both from the White House side as well as the Ukraine side expressed how hard-nosed the negotiations were. But what they came to was this framework treaty, a framework agreement that's still to be signed. And the framework means that we're still having a separate set of negotiations afterwards, but this is a beginning wherein both sides delineate what is being promised. From the Ukraine side, the eventual future creation of this fund that would be gained from the rare earth minerals. And from the United States side, what Ukraine was looking for was language about security guarantees in the framework agreement. That didn't happen. And also, unfortunately, before that happened, the president of Ukraine was asked to leave. The first time that's ever happened. The president of Ukraine was asked to leave, not even by the president or the vice president. They did not have the courage to turn to them and ask them to leave. They had to ask somebody else to ask them to leave. It is that which prevented the deal. It is not Ukraine that prevented the deal. And if the United States is ready to have the deal, which even President Trump has said he's ready to sign the deal, if that's the case, then we can sign this, any minute now.
Do you think there is a chance to sign this deal still later on? Okay.
Oh, it might happen this week.
Wow.
That's how much of the negotiations are happening going forward. Again, it is a framework agreement. There's no promises being made other than they will set up a negotiating committee. The eventual deal that is made from that committee needs to be ratified by the Verkhovna Rada. So this will eventually be a full-fledged treaty. But to step that up, you need to have this first framework agreement, and that's why it's so easy to do, so long as both sides can agree to promise to do things in the future, with nothing set in terms of value, etc. And then the framework agreement will lead to an eventual committee that within the next couple of months, by the end of the year, could theoretically work out a treaty that is ratified by the Rada, that is ratified by the United States.
Yeah, but this insulting moment when J.D. Vance was yelling at President Zelensky, have you ever been thankful or what? And so this was so embarrassing and insulting that that is really difficult for President Zelensky to keep calm in this moment, and that's why they threw him out. And later
everybody said. Everybody in the United States, well, apart from the voices online that support President Trump, but many people I was speaking to from Washington, many people around the United Nations, and of course from Europe and Ukraine were saying they all remarked on how remarkable the patience was of President Zelensky when literally lies were being spoken. And then when President Trump entered into the voice of a campaign speech and started talking about Hunter Biden, that Hunter Biden had a bathroom where he developed files against him. This was, of course, against protocol, against all manner of dignity for the office. And it led that moment, which was, again, started by J.D. Vance, which you rightly identified that he, attacked President Zelensky. He continued these attacks over the weekend against President Zelensky. And then he insulted the people of Europe when he said that Ukraine can't rely on random countries that have armies that are so small that haven't fought a war in the last 30 years, insulting those very countries, including Ukraine, including the Baltic countries, including most of the European countries who have all sent soldiers to serve in Iraq and Afghanistan because the United States was attacked. And many of those countries suffered losses. People have died serving overseas on behalf of the United States. And for that, President Trump nor Vice President Vance have ever thanked anybody.
We should tell him. We should tell them really that. That's good that you mentioned this, really. And but let's get back to the rare earth thing again. The situation, which was so embarrassing, and that made it so difficult that you could come back, and it was continued the next day also on Fox News that they were trying to ask President Zelensky to say sorry, and this was not possible, of course.
So for us, it was all in the same day. For you probably saw the Fox News the next day. For President Zelensky arrived, I was on television the entire day. So my day began when President Zelensky arrived at the White House sometime around 11 a.m. in the United States. That's when he arrived at the door. There was approximately an hour and a half where they had private conversations. And then in the 1 p.m. hour is when we saw the arguments in the Oval Office. After that, President Zelensky left before lunch was served. We all understood that the president's staff ate the lunch that was reserved for the working delegation. It's ridiculous. And then we had a couple of hours of in-between time. President Zelensky was supposed to speak at 1600 at 4 p.m. At a think tank, and that was canceled in Washington so that he could focused solely on the Fox News. The Fox News was pre-taped before showing on the air, so it wasn't a live interview, and that aired in the United States at 1800 at 6 p.m. So all of that was one long day for us of trying to figure out what's happening. The president did also have about an hour to meet with a small number of Ukrainian community at the Ukraine House, which is adjacent to the Ukrainian embassy. So he met with some of our bishops who were there, even one of our Baptist leaders, and then some community who were local to the area and could be there on that day. So all of that was a very compressed day for us, trying to find out what the next steps are. But you started with the Fox News, which unfortunately it wasn't as formal a seating as with the world leader. I would love to have them sitting in two chairs facing each other. They basically invited him and put him on a desk that you would have an argument about, and that wasn't the best view for him. It made him look like any political analyst or pundit on television. And I don't think that the viewing public got a better understanding of what's happening in Ukraine, simply because they were focusing so much about what happened earlier in the day and the words that the president used, as opposed to allowing President Zelensky to do what he did at the beginning of the meeting with President Trump, which is show him pictures about this is what happens when Russia invades.
Yeah, I saw that. That was. I had also the feeling that President Donald Trump, was not really emotional seeing those pictures. Didn't care a lot about those. Absolutely not.
No. And
anyway,
unfortunately, it's his understanding of the world through pictures, because we know that he refuses to visit Ukraine. He was offered and invited many times during his first administration and refused, and he refuses to go now. So.
The most ridiculous thing I thought was this question of this guy who later heard is the boyfriend of Marjorie Taylor Greene, reporter, yes, who was asking about if he was wearing a suit, and I thought this answer of Zelensky was really cool. I liked it.
Yes, yeah.
That was and later on you see pictures of Winston Churchill also not wearing a suit in this moment. Imagine if President Roosevelt those days would tell
many guests of the White House do not wear suits. It is there, and today, just before I sat down with you, there was a presidential, not a presidential, but the White House press briefing today, and they were specifically asked, what is the dress code? Is there a dress code? And they don't have one, because there is no dress code for people who come from the Middle East, wearing robes and head covering and wearing sandals. Same thing with delegations from Asian countries, from African countries. Everybody is welcome to wear what they normally wear, whether they're a world leader, whether they're a pop star. There is no dress code for this. This is simply something that right-wing media has developed by themselves.
And that was pre-made, and Donald Trump was all the time focusing on this suit thing. And even Trump wanted this reporter, no, it was this guy, ask his question. Maybe.
Right. Well,
he said, what is your second question? And then the guy started with it. Yeah. So this is...
and this is part of the White House has removed the Associated Press and other press outfits from having access to pool reporting like that, and they've allowed for these radical outfits that aren't journalism, because they don't have fact checkers, they don't have editors. They simply put out theories from the internet. And people, because it looks like a news person, it looks like a person wearing a jacket and a tie and holding a microphone, people assume that what they're hearing is just the same as what they see on the news.
So what we see, Donald Trump and his surroundings, they behave really like Russian assets. That's what I hear a lot of from many commenters. And
they have made changes. They have made changes that the Russian government has said aligns with their policy. That includes their changes in terms of, as of today, getting confirmation that they have stopped the, it was mentioned over the weekend, but it's confirmed today that the United States has stopped the delivery of shipments of weapons to Ukraine that are currently in Poland. They're already in Poland. They've simply been stopped. They have for over a month now, so almost the entire period since the inauguration, they have refused to share targeting location by satellite for weapons like HIMARS and others that can hit deeper into Russia than the munitions. So they have refused to share targeting information since the inauguration of President Trump. They have also worked towards allowing additional Russian personnel in as diplomats to the United States. Shockingly, we heard reports that the United States Strategic Cyber Command was told to stand down from ongoing cyber operations against Russia, but that was announced by the Department of Defense spokesperson as unconfirmed, and so that's still on the table. But there are many of these kind of changes which again align with sorry, I keep saying Soviet, Russian policy as expressed by the spokesman for the Russian government, that the moves that the United States and the Trump administration are making are absolutely in line with Russian policy.
Soviet and Russians is all kind of the same. And that Trump is a danger for the American people and for the American nation, and that's so obvious for us, but not for the Republicans. For example, Marco Rubio or Lindsey Graham. That's what I heard. They changed really the mind in the last moment, and they dropped on the Trump side completely.
Well, it is quite clear that Senator Graham, who's been a strong supporter of Ukraine legislation, with his rhetoric, is very quick to jump from one side to the other. 2 weeks ago in Munich,
yeah.
he announced that Zelensky is the ally that he's always been looking for. The day of the Oval Office conversation, he said that he would like somebody else to come from Ukraine instead of President Zelensky. So very
so
quick
stupid.
change. The shocking change is Marco Rubio. There was just a article released in the magazine The Atlantic, which is a longer researched piece as opposed to just quick news, explaining that Marco Rubio is being frustrated with the fact that he's often the last person to know changes in foreign policy, that is all being done out of the White House as opposed to the State Department. And that could be used as an excuse, but it is really shocking what he himself has done, including putting out a statement after the Oval Office incident stating that he was proud of President Trump for defending the United States. There was nothing to defend the United States from in the Oval Office. It was two allies meeting. There's no defense needed. But more shockingly is the fact that in his subsequent interviews, he's talked how shocked he is when people complain that the United States is in active negotiations with a terrorist state like Russia, where he has personally not just drafted reports that have been put out by the Senate about the Russians' attack on the United States, including a long Senate intelligence hearing report on the Havana syndrome and United States personnel that were targeted by Russian technologies, but also he has decried and lambasted United States diplomats and leaders who have sought to meet with the leadership of Iran, who have sought to meet with the leadership of other countries that are either on the terrorist list or simply rogue states, and such as the loosening of communications with Cuba. We know he's of Cuban descent, but he will very quickly, he has for decades, very quick to condemn anybody talking with an authoritarian regime. And here he is doing that very same thing without any explanation.
Wow, that's shocking. When I hear those things, then I wonder all the time, how is it possible that the whole people and so many people, they don't have any values, they don't understand what's going on, and they just change sides, or they believe whatever they are told. And we had in Germany also this thing in the Nazi area. I was wondering how those people felt when they were killing Jews, or when they were making those horrible crimes, and they were fine with that. It's my people, and so I think.
Yeah, well, I believe this is why we will probably see Cabaret running on Broadway for an extended period, just because it deals with exactly that same issue. The Kander and Ebb musical, talking about the rising, how quickly fascism can change the world around you without people stopping it and without people recognizing it until it's too late and it surrounds you all. I think that it's a message that was done then that is resonating now for people. Of course, we live in the richest, or for me, I live in the richest, most secure country in all the world. There is nothing for me to ever fear a foreign tank coming onto American territory, as President Zelensky repeated to President Trump. Um, so we don't really understand what it is, and we don't understand that what the benefit of the Western alliance has been.
Yeah.
We also don't recognize, even for those who do recognize, why the Western Alliance was so good, because it, in their minds, kept us safe. It did not keep the Ukrainian people safe, of course, during the Cold War. So Kennan's policy, as the book you pointed out, he was very, for the sake of the rest of the world, ready to leave behind all of those Ukrainians, all of those
Yeah.
Poles,
That's true. You're
the
right.
Baltic countries,
That's true.
and they were beaten to death up until the end of the Soviet Union.
Right.
You know,
Thanks for mentioning that. I didn't.
no, it's
Yeah.
something that was a reality in Germany. You know, up until 1989, we know that people were living under constant fear, constant surveillance, but also um, being tortured on a regular basis. This is something that we need to acknowledge as part of the trade-off that the Western Alliance did in the name of peace. And do we want a similar peace right now? Do we want to? So, are we talking about Munich? Or are we talking about Yalta here? Uh, you know, in Munich, we can even talk about World War I and how the world and many American voices who were in favor of Kaiser Wilhelm and Prussian advances into Belgium, saying that, well, you know, we don't need to worry about that, and it's just repeated time and again up until it's too late. And unfortunately for the world today, we have so much information about what's happened in the past. We know our history. It's all available to anybody. And we seem to have made the mistake in Georgia. We made the mistake in 2014 Ukraine, again in 2022. And, you know, as I forcefully remind my Republican friends, you did not like it when the President of the United States, Obama, did not react with weapons for Ukraine in 2014. You did
Mm-hmm.
not like it that he was the first president not to visit Ukraine, and he did that on purpose. Same thing with President Trump. President Obama stated specifically that he saw Ukraine as not as important to the United States as it is to Russia, the same kind of policy that we're hearing out of the Trump administration. So again, to all of my Republican friends, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, why are you returning us to another reset, which you all condemned at the time? It is simply history repeating itself over and over again.
Wow. Yeah. It's as you point out, Andrij, it's really also a lack of information what the people have, and this lack of information comes also by information overflow. There's too
Oh
much
my, yes,
information.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, 100%, 100%. And this is a plan. In terms of the Trump administration, they were out of power, and regardless of whether he was going to be sent to prison, whether he was going to not run for president because he was embarrassed, he had a team of people working for 4 years to craft a plan of how they are going to start. And this is why it's been such a strong administration in terms of the work product they put out. There are presidential memorandums and signings every day on a different topic. And so there's no point, as you said about information overload, there is a certain sense for no organized opposition to gather together. Because what are they gathering about? Well, today he's talking about immigration. Do we get immigration aligned with? Well, now he's talking about Russia. No, wait. Now he's going to, today he just announced that they are going to fire 60,000 people from the Department of Veterans Affairs. It is one thing after another, and the amount of it becomes, yes, it's an information overload for people to understand, but politically, it is too diverse for people to settle on what is the one issue they're going to argue about. And I would point this out that the West did this when the Olympic Games were held in Sochi in 2008, right before the Georgian invasion. And what the West did then, was it 2008? Am I thinking of the Ukrainian
It
invasion?
was 2016, I guess, no? No,
14, 14,
14.
Ukraine was invaded.
Sure.
So, but the in advance of that, so we know that Georgia was invaded before then, right? So there were sanctions put in. Obviously, I mentioned Obama. That was what a reset was beforehand. But there was a united front put by Western leaders and United Nations leaders before the Olympics, and that is that they settled on one issue to press Russia about. And what their one issue that they decided on was reestablishing rights for same-sex couples, the LGBT community. This was in contrast to many of us who are arguing about recognizing the genocide of the Circassian people, which is the entire Olympic Village was built on traditional Circassian land. Also, we wanted to talk about Georgia. Nobody was mentioning that during the Olympics. But they settled on this issue. And why did they settle on this issue? Is because in the year leading up to the Olympics, Russia passed laws specifically banning same-sex relationships and repressions against them in order for them to quickly repeal them as soon as the West settled on that being the issue. So the West easily played into the hand that was dealt by Russia. But it is an example of countries coming together and deciding on one strategy. So not countries in the United States, but an opposition needs to have a set core of things that they're going to argue about. And for instance, this week there have been massive rallies around the United States, and people are just trying to understand what's happening. There are Ukrainian flags, sometimes there are Palestinian flags involved, sometimes there's Israeli flags, sometimes there's LGBT rights, sometimes it's about undocumented immigrants. There's so many things to be angry about and protest about that the opposition, whatever it ends up being, hasn't settled into a cohesive voice yet.
The most important thing is of our conversation today is I guess that we in Europe should get our defense alliance together. We should understand that America's for the moment it's out, and we hope that this Trump era will go over. And that, yeah, I wanted to ask you also about the possibility to impeach Trump, but maybe this is really not possible.
The congressman who was escorted out because of his uncivil behavior yesterday will be introducing articles of impeachment. Congressman Al Green from Texas. I believe he's done that before for President Trump right from the beginning. So he's rather a reactionary congressman who does this without any hope of actually seeing an impeachment happen. As we all know, both the House of Representatives and the Senate are controlled by the Republicans, and they would not allow a vote for an impeachment procedure to start. So the earliest that could happen would be if, by chance, the House of Representatives were to fall into Democratic hands, which wouldn't happen before 2027. And then they can, at that point in the next Congress, decide whether they want to bring up articles of impeachment.
So a lot of damage can be done still in this long period. A lot of
damage will be done. I just mentioned today the announcement of 60,000 employees for the Department of Veteran Affairs. Every day, it seems another agency, the Federal Aviation Agency, is being reportedly closed down and mixed into another department. We are hearing the same for the post office, to shut that down. That was one of the founding institutions of our country, and have that merged into the Commerce Department. A lot of things that are being shut down, and an enormous amount of people who are being fired. And these are not people who work in Washington, D.C. Over 80% of federal workers are outside of Washington, D.C. They're all over the country. These are park rangers. These are food inspectors. These are federal offices around the country. And it is those people who are being laid off, and we will see that reflected in the unemployment rates in the country. This will only lead to higher unemployment, will only lead to higher interest rates, higher inflation, and just spiral a certain segment of society.
So sorry about that. Andrij,
we work together, we work ahead. So there are still Republican voices, especially key committee members, both in the Senate and the House, who are interested in standing strong for Ukraine. For that, we encourage them to keep on voicing, but more importantly, will be voting. We haven't had anybody vote There have been people who have condemned Putin just in the last 2 weeks who haven't voted to support Ukraine. So we want to see actions, not words. We'll see if that happens going forward. And that goes with the Democrats as well. They need to have a consistent plan about Ukraine that they need to put out.
From our point of view in Europe, it's really optimistic that we woke up and that we make our alliance and Ukraine. I will be really in favor that Ukraine will be in the lead in this thing. But what about America? Because I don't want to give up on America. This is such a I love America. I can tell you, I really many.
I'm obviously a big fan as well. So
yes, so and I think there's such a big amount of so many great Americans are there.
Yeah.
For example, do you know Jake Bro?
Yes, he was just on a great debate with that had former General Hodges on
Yes,
Piers Morgan.
yes.
It was good that both of them had their opinion. The
Yes.
other people are not experts, so it was kind of a silly thing to have a debate like that. But
Yeah.
I encourage people to get involved in the discussion online,
Yeah.
like Jake does. Absolutely.
Absolutely, and more people like that we need, and we have to convince. I can't believe that the people are so dumb and stupid that they make so stupid things. And they follow Trump, who's making the most stupid things. So we have to convince the people that
again,
where's
everybody's free.
Where's
Free
the
to vote.
truth?
Everybody's free. Yeah, everybody's
Right.
free to vote, and unfortunately, it is the truth is the real issue here. The spread of misinformation, when somebody like Elon Musk goes into Twitter and takes away all of the checks on disinformation and allows the spread of it, it just confuses us even more because, like you mentioned earlier, there's too much information out there. And so who has the time to verify and check like it used to be when there was a checking service about disinformation online?
Yes, but you can use your brain or your knowledge or your feeling towards human beings. When you see bullying somebody, you must feel for the victim, and it's obvious that President Zelensky was treated really, really unfairly. And what I wonder that the people, they don't see that, and they don't care. Something is wrong with the compass there.
Not many people have the time to sit and watch the entire interview. If they went into the interview at all, they may have seen coverage beforehand talking about President Zelensky negatively. They may have heard President Trump state that President Zelensky convinced Biden to give him $350 billion. All of these are untrue things. And so when they watch the video, understanding that their knowledge includes that kind of misinformation, they may have a different opinion about what happened during that, but they were very likely not watch an entire 40-plus minute video interaction in the White House. It's just not something people have time for.
Yeah, okay, but those 10 minutes bullying, they are enough to see that something bad is happening here. But anyway, okay, let's hope that the people will wake up and see where's the truth and where not, and that they keep.
I will just warn you that we're still in a long path until the until we have a diminishing political stance of the White House, which is why they're doing all of these presidential memorandums so early and quickly, because they want to do that before a political backlash comes against them. So until such time that their popularity ratings really fall, until such time that members of their own party are willing to vote against them on anything in the Senate or the House, then we will still see this. Again, they are prepared for this. They are prepared for this beginning, and they have a plan of how many law and presidential orders they want to put out. Up until things start going south, they will continue doing that. So I will say that it's probably going to be a little bit more time until we have to wait.
That's interesting. Okay, thank you very much that you came into my podcast today, and hopefully we'll be able to meet again one day.
Absolutely. Hopefully on the European continent. I'll keep in touch with my travel plans. Okay.
Oh yeah, let me know when you're here.
Absolutely. Great.
Come over and visit us. Bye.
Absolutely.
Andrij,
Bye.
all the best.
Okay.
До побачення. Па-па.
До побачення.